Okay, the next book is by a pretty famous 20th century Russian-American novelist, but it's not one of his novels. It's one of the collections he put out of his interviews, articles, and some book reviews and other miscellaneous material. That novelist is Vladimir Nabokov, and the book is called Strong Opinions. The book is actually put together by him. The book is a good length, about 335, exactly 335 pages, and about two-thirds of that consists of interviews that he gave with journalists, magazine writers, just anyone who basically wanted to talk to him. And the last third is a lot of material that I found less important, or maybe for specialists, and I'll go on to talk about that in a bit. But really the heart of what I was interested in was the first two-thirds with the interviews, mostly because I wanted to see what Nabokov had to say about his, perhaps his best-known novel, Lolita, which I also plan to review here very soon. But, like I said, I've read this to supplement my reading of Lolita, and I was sort of reading to better understand it. Strong Opinions is a really good choice if you want to get an idea of Nabokov's preferences and sort of his ideas of the novel and where he's coming from as a writer of fiction. Those are really the abiding concerns that last all throughout the interviews. And Strong Opinions is really no joke of a title. The man has some very unorthodox opinions of everything, and most notably literature itself, and the relative merit of other writers. Then I'll mention those below as well. Like I said, the last third of the novel contains letters to the editors of various publications, most of which are negligible in my much more pusillanimous opinion, and articles, a few of which cover his interest in Lepidoptera. Lepidoptera is the scientific study of butterflies and moths, which I assume most readers of this collection will probably skip. I always read an entire book cover to cover before reading it and reviewing it. I figure it's one of the, it's the least I can do for anyone watching these videos, and the least I can do for the book itself. But I openly admit to skimming over some of these contributions that are in the last third of the book. In many of them, including an overly lengthy article on his opinion of Edmund Wilson's relationship with and translation of Eugene Onegin, Pushkin's epic novel, he delights in being particularly pedantic, tetchy, and cruel. So I just skipped over that bit. As I said, the most important part of this will be, for most people, the interviews. So while the themes of the interviews tend to become a little repetitive, I found them important in thinking through Nabokov's fiction. I've previously read Invitation to a Beheading, Penin, and perhaps one other novel whose name isn't coming to mind. He hates the classical novel of ideas with a passion. He thinks many of his Russian novelist confreres have been guilty of that sort of Dostoevskian moralism that so often accompanies the novel of ideas. That moralism also pops up in Russian writers like Gogol. He abhors Gogol's fascination with religion and Dostoevsky's clunky, bumbling characters. At least, those are his words. He thinks that Hemingway and Conrad are, and I thought this was really funny, writers for boys, and he thinks Faulkner is terrible. I have a soft spot in my heart for Faulkner, so that pained me to read that. These are really the tip of the iceberg regarding authors on whom he has rather unusual opinions. There are many, many more. He thinks, for example, that Anna Karenina can't be understood apart from a thorough knowledge of the shape of a particular kind of trolley car ridden in 19th century Russia, and Ulysses is meaningless if you don't have a detailed mental map of Joyce's Dublin at the ready. So he's really not so much a symbol or allegory or metaphor kind of guy, he's a detail guy. There are stories that he tells in here when he was transcribing his lectures that he gave at Cornell University when he was teaching there, that he made his students memorize all of Joyce's London in Ulysses, and that he made them memorize the layout of the trolley car that Anna Karenina would have been in. So he's a very sort of idiosyncratic, eccentric character as a writer and a reader, and most certainly as a teacher. His politics, if you're interested in them at all, he describes as liberal, yet seems to be a rather ardent defender of things like interventionism in Vietnam towards the very end of his life. Vietnam was ramping up again, and very broadly, he favors American interests and the protection of those interests. He also happens to think that Freud is a joke, and constantly belittles and pokes fun at Freud and his fiction. What's most surprising about this collection is that the pieces were chosen by Nabokov himself. His name is on the cover. It's his collection, and he obviously couldn't care less about coming off as a, cavilling, bitchy curmudgeon, or advertising that he didn't mind ending a decade. That he didn't mind ending a decades-long friendship over differences in translating a 19th century Russian poem. Again, I'm talking here about Pushkin's Eugene Onegin. If you don't share his opinions, he has no problem calling you a Philistine. Why should he care? He's asked at one point in the book, Mr. Nabokov, what is your position in the world of letters? And he responds, the view is pretty good from up here. I guess it's good to be the king, huh? This is Strong Opinions by Vladimir Nabokov, a book of interviews, essays, and the occasional piece on chess and Lepidoptera.